Hi everyone, this is Nia and today I'll be doing the Q&A video that I mentioned a few weeks back. First off, I would just like to thank everyone who participated and left out a bunch of questions. I have to say that some of them are easier to answer than others. There are also some questions which are more about watercolor technicalities, which I don't think I'll be able to answer here because that's something that requires me to demonstrate certain techniques. So I might make another video for that maybe. I think today I will focus more about the personal art journey and things like that. So I hope you guys don't mind. I'll just make this into more of a get to know video Q&A chit chat thing. I didn't realize that you guys were actually interested in knowing my background, and it's good to get some clarifications of what you guys are actually curious about. And while I'm answering the questions, I thought that it would be relevant to also do a little food illustration of an Indonesian dessert that my mom used to make me when I was little, just to share something that's a bit more personal with you guys. First off, a lot of you asked where I'm from, and I think I've hinted and mentioned this quite a bit in my videos, but for those of you who missed it, my quick answer is Indonesia. I was born in Jakarta, which is the capital, and like any other countries, we also have shaved ice dessert, which is what I'm going to be painting today. This dish is called as Delima. It's eaten cold as a dessert or as a refreshing snack, and it's made out of small cuttings of water chestnuts, which are then covered with tapioca starch. And for those of you who might not know, the texture of tapioca starch when you boil it in water is very chewy, similar to bubble tea or sago. But because this only has a small layer of coating with the starch, it's not as chewy and it has a slight crunch from the water chestnut in the inside. People like to add food coloring to this. The normal traditional color is red, which is what I'm painting today, but I've also seen people make it into greens or pinks. But the reason why this is red is because Delima is actually a word for pomegranate, and this dessert is supposed to replicate the look of the pomegranate fruit and the little red jewels that it has. After the sago is cooked, it's then boiled with pandan and vanilla simple syrup and eaten with coconut milk. This is usually served cold with either just ice cubes or, like what I'm painting, it can also be topped with shaved ice. So from that description, I'm pretty sure you guys realize how much I care about food. I really love food, which is why I also love to paint them. Maybe it's a little bit too detailed, but since a lot of you are from different countries, I just thought that you might be interested in knowing the subject matter that I'm painting, since it might not look familiar to most of you. Anyway, sorry for that long intro. Now let's get back to the Q&A. This is not in any particular order. I just listed from what I was asked, and hopefully this is fine. There are also some repeated questions, so I'll just skip through the same ones. And I hope I can get through most of them because there are actually a few. So the first question is, what watercolor sketchbook do you use? I use my own watercolor sketchbook that I made. I also have a Skillshare class on this, and I made those specific watercolor sketchbooks that I usually use for my paintings and my videos. So if any of you are interested, like usual, you can go to the link in the description box for a free 2 months membership. It's a class on how I made custom sketchbooks, so you can customize the paper and size and cover. So it's a lot of fun, and if you guys are interested, you can go to that link. So next question, what are your favorite paints, colors that are helpful for a beginner to have? So I don't really have any particular favorite with my paints. I just use what I have, which is my Holbein and my Pentel that I use the most of. I think for beginners, I would just say whatever your budget is, whatever you can afford, just get that. It doesn't really matter if you get artist grade or student grade, especially if you're just starting out, because I think as a beginner you should focus more on the fundamentals, and the paint doesn't really play too much of a role for that, as long as you understand things like color mixing and form, drawing and stuff like that. paper is something that you should pay more attention to because watercolor paper is different than normal paper. So I would suggest for you to at least use watercolor paper that is minimal 200 GSM. I don't think I would go any lower than that because it would warp. And avoid painting on print paper or sketchbook paper because they absorb the paint differently, and you wouldn't be able to reactivate the paint because they absorb the paint completely instead of drying on the surface. In terms of specific colors, I think when I started watercolors, I started with like 16 and then 24 colors. But that being said, I think I was used to color mixing already, so I don't think it matters too much how many paints I have. But as a beginner, I would actually recommend for you to use less colors. So obviously you should have the main primary colors, so red, blue, and yellow, or also cyan, magenta, and yellow. Those are the go-to, and once you can really control color just by using those minimal colors, I think you'll be able to learn a lot more. The next is recommendations for beginner supplies. So I already touched up on that. So same thing with the paint and paper. As for the brush, I would say just stick with the cheap synthetic brushes. They're really easy to get, very affordable, and as beginners, from what I've seen my students do, they're just kids though, so I don't know where your level's at, but I see that certain people have tendencies to use the brush or flick the brush in the opposite direction of the bristles, which might damage it faster than if you were to follow the bristles. And these are just habits that you might naturally have. So I think by having synthetic brushes, it's okay if you damage the brush because it's very easily replaceable. And I think if you don't have the pressure of using expensive supplies, you can be a bit more brave with your painting and in the end learn a little bit more. The next question is, and this is asked quite a few times, do you get artist block and how do you overcome it? So yes and no. I do get artist block sometimes, but a lot of times I don't get to paint as much as I would like to, and also at the same time I get a lot of ideas of what I do want to paint. So what I do is I list down a whole bunch of things that is in my head, and I know that I wouldn't be able to follow up with all of them. So whenever I don't know what to paint when I do want to paint, I just look at the whole list, and I guess this helps with the art block. And after I figure out which one I want to paint from that list, I just look up for references in Pinterest and Google or any other social media and use that to my advantage. So I guess that's how I get rid of my art block. Is watercolor your favorite medium? I would have to say no, even though I do have a watercolor YouTube channel, but I love art and I love trying different mediums. Like a lot of you, I started with acrylics, with painting, but my favorite medium since high school, and it probably still is now, but I don't do a lot of sadly, is actually clay. I really love sculpting. When did you start to paint? Honestly, I really don't remember. I've always loved to draw or paint and things like that. And I think I told you before in one of my videos, older videos, that I drew an elephant on my wall when I was little and my mom had to repaint it, and I drew it straight after she finished repainting it because I've just always loved drawing. And in terms of painting, I don't know, but maybe in junior school, sometime around there. I think I never personally separate drawing from painting, so sorry, I can't give you an accurate answer for this. Is this your main work? What do you do for a living? And what do you like to do? Yes, Skillshare and YouTube is my main source of income. I also have a couple of students that I teach one-on-one private drawing lessons or painting lessons, but because of this whole situation, I just give them private online lessons for now. In terms of what I like doing, I'm pretty sure you guys know that I love to paint. I love to create things, I like art, and I love to cook and bake, even though I can't really do too much of that because of my current skin condition. Which leads on to the next question, which is, why do you need gloves? Okay, I made a full video on this already, so I won't rant too much about it, but basically, short answer is because of my eczema. I've been getting really bad flare-ups, and the gloves not only hides the hideous nastiness of my blisters and cuts and dry skin, but it also helps supports it when I bend my fingers. It's so dry that it cracks when I bend them, and I would only use the gloves when it's in that bad condition. So the next one is my hand fine now? And yes, as you can see, it's much better. I don't need the gloves anymore, but I still get flare-ups. It comes and goes, but the peak of the flare-up is never as bad as the previous one, and it's getting better overall. Yeah, thank you for your concern. Next question is why you got interested in watercolor. I always find that watercolors look really interesting because you can be so wild with it and yet have so much control with it at the same time, and it has so many different techniques, and I think out of all the painting mediums it's the most versatile. So we didn't really use too much of watercolors back in high school, but uni is when I started to explore watercolors a little bit more. That's when I like to paint something to include in my graphic design works because it creates a lot of dynamic. Next is, do you like other media, digital drawing? And the answer is yes. As I mentioned, I used to paint with acrylics, I love clay, and I use other things like oil pastels and pencils as well. In terms of digital drawing, I actually used to do a lot of digital drawing. As I mentioned, I did graphic design in uni, and one of the classes required us to do digital paintings, and I really love the control that you have with digital drawing and how you can fix mistakes and of course undo things. But I really miss the human touch, and I realized that I wanted to go back to traditional painting. But it doesn't mean that I don't digital paint anymore, but I use it mostly for ideation before I paint my watercolors if I have any issues with the colors that I want to use and if I'm unsure about certain things. Next question is actually a whole bunch of them. Are you a full-time artist? How did you start it all? And what are your other interests? Yes, if painting on YouTube and Skillshare makes me an artist, and if that's my main source of income and my main work, then I guess you can say I'm a full-time artist. In terms of when I started it all with art, I mentioned I don't remember when I started art, but in terms of YouTube, I would probably have to say from a quarter life crisis when I really didn't know what else to do. I had several work experiences, and what I was in the middle of I knew was coming to an end, and I needed to do something else for myself. I figured that I haven't painted for a while also back then, and I decided to just give YouTube a go. Posted something, turns out that people are actually interested in my art, which I find really curious but awesome at the same time, and I really love where my channel has gotten now, and the fact that I can do this full-time and people are finding good use from my art. I really enjoy it and I really love sharing it. Next bunch of questions are actually from the same person, and the questions are you self-taught or took classes? Where are you from? Which is your favorite artwork till date? In terms of being self-taught, I would still consider myself as self-taught, even though in high school I did take art. I'm not sure how high schools work in your country, but where I grew up, which is Perth, Australia, we get to pick the main subjects that we want to take in year 12, year 11 and 12, and art was basically my main thing. And we did mostly fine arts. We didn't really do illustrations and things like that. We didn't really get taught fundamentals like portraits, proportions, and I mean, they did go over it, but only very lightly. We never focused on the form and how to break things down. They mostly just gave us subjects to paint and maybe paint in a certain style, like a certain artist. We learned a lot about the masters. And in uni, I took graphic design, but same thing. We didn't really get taught too much, even with the softwares that we used. I remember that one of the students actually asked back in uni why they're not teaching us how to exactly use Photoshop, InDesign, and Illustrator. And they said that that's something for you to figure out yourself or for you to go to college for. In uni, they teach you how to it's mostly about thinking more conceptually and how to break down briefs for clients, from brainstorming to ideation process to researching before coming up with the final logo or whatever you're making, and then presenting it to the class as you would present to clients. Yeah, let me just elaborate though. In Australia, college is where you get your diplomas and uni is where you get your bachelor's degree. So when the teacher told us for you to learn those softwares by yourself or go to college, that's what he meant. Where are you from? As I mentioned, Indonesia, Jakarta, that's where I was born, and then I grew up in Perth, Australia, and then I came back to Indonesia again. Which is your favorite artwork till date? I don't have a favorite. I'm actually quite detached to my artwork, and this is something that I learned from working in the design industry. I think the difference between design and art is that art, I think you are more attached to your artwork because artwork is a bit more personal. But from my experience with design and working for so many years, you just work for clients, and even if you like a certain design, if the client doesn't like it and they choose the ugly design, which a lot of times they do, you just have to roll with it because that's not about you, it's about the client. And I think I've just developed that sort of thing, that work is just work. And painting, though I really enjoy it, I'm not probably as attached to it as the average person would be. So I wouldn't say I have a favorite artwork. I guess that's also because I don't really focus too much on the final product. It's mostly about the process and what I've learned from the process, and also just enjoying the subject matter that I pick to paint. Next question is there any artist that you look up to in particular when it comes to watercoloring? I don't think that there's one particular one that totally stands out, but I follow a lot of watercolor artists on social media. It's just that every single one of them are special in their own way, so not one of them stand out because all of them stand out by itself. That's their style and that's special to them, and it's something that I wouldn't be able to replicate because it's theirs. And even though those artists might paint the same subject matter, they always have a special thing that they create with their own hands, and everyone is built differently, and we have certain things that we do naturally that others might not, and that's what makes art special. Okay, more questions from the same person. How do you get rid of stress or bad thoughts? Your favorite book? Every time I see your color of your pencil, I wonder if you're a fan of Shine. Sorry, but I'm not a fan of Shine. I had to actually Google that. I didn't really know. Sorry. And in terms of books, I don't really read books. I used to read a lot of manga. I'm that type of person. Yeah, illiterate. I'm really bad with reading. For the how to get rid of stress or bad thoughts, I'm not sure if you meant art-wise or in real life. That's a really hard question. I would just answer this in terms of art. I don't really get stress or bad thought. That's not a really good answer, but I think it just depends on how you perceive your art. If you get stressed because you're not creating something that's good or something like that, I'm guessing that's where the question is leading. The thing is, I always see my art or painting or any sort of creativity more as a learning platform. So whenever I paint is for me to learn something, to enjoy the process of painting, and as I mentioned before, I don't really look at the final outcome. So if I paint something and it didn't turn out great, I just repaint it again. I guess it also helps the fact that I'm not attached to my work. That is probably why I don't get stressed or bad thoughts. So maybe that's the key. Just don't get too attached to your artwork. This is coming from a place of personal work though. However, if there's a deadline that you need to catch, or I know that it doesn't look that great, but I need to hand it in a certain time, there's no way of getting rid of the stress, but you just have to push through till the end. And sometimes, a lot of times, the outcome isn't actually as bad as what I thought it would be. It's just because I'm too stressed out, I'm too overworked by then, and everything just looks bad. You know, when you look at something for too long and you just get desensitized and it just looks meh, even though it might be great to other people who's never seen it. So just push through. I think that's the only advice I can give. Anyway, moving on to the next bunch of questions, which will be the last. What is your art background? Did you study art in school? Do you paint every day? Do you work as a full-time artist? I've answered most of that. The only one is, do you paint every day? And sadly, the answer is no. But I don't think I want to paint every day either. I think I would get bored. But to answer the question, that's mostly because I spend more time editing and producing the video more than the painting. In comparison to how much I edit and how much time I voice over, painting is probably only 10 to 20%, not much, but I still enjoy it either way because I love sharing my art with you guys, and it's still the most that I've painted ever. So yeah, I'm just really glad that I have this platform. So there are actually still a whole bunch of questions that I haven't answered yet, and I might just make a part 2 of this if you guys enjoyed it. But yeah, for now, that's it. I hope the answers were satisfactory. Like usual, all of the tools and social media links will be listed in the description box. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching till the end, and I'll see you at the next one. Bye!